Now let's get to the impact that higher energy prices are having on this economy, as President Trump says a deal between the U.S. and Iran has been largely negotiated. Officials say an announcement on an agreement may come as soon as today. Here's Secretary of State Marco Rubio earlier this morning in India.
The idea that somehow this president, given everything he's already proven he's willing to do, is going to somehow agree to a deal that ultimately winds up putting Iran in a stronger position when it comes to nuclear ambitions is absurd. That's just not going to happen. But our preference is to address this through a diplomatic means, and that's what we're endeavoring to do here. I think we've made some progress. I'm always cautious when I say that because you can agree to things on paper, they actually have to be implemented. But I do think perhaps there is the possibility that over the next few hours, the world will get some good news, at least with regards to the Straits and with regards to a process that can ultimately leave us where the president wants us to be. And that is a world that no longer has to be in fear or worry about an Iranian nuclear weapon.
This weekend at the pumps, Americans are paying an average of more than $4.50 a gallon for gas, with diesel over $5.50 a gallon, as oil continues to hover around that $100 a barrel mark. This has led to consumer sentiment dropping for a third straight month to an all-time low. On Friday, Fed Chairman Kevin Warsh was sworn in, taking over for Jerome Powell, who resisted calls by President Trump to quickly cut interest rates. Warsh will be tasked with finding a delicate balance between controlling inflation and attempting to lower rates to spur economic growth. Despite the surge in energy prices, the U.S. economy has remained resilient, with workers who contribute to their retirement funds seeing a big boost in savings. The Dow closed on Friday at an all-time record high. The S&P 500 is on its longest winning streak since 2023, fueled by optimism about artificial intelligence, robust corporate earnings, and growing hope of a permanent U.S. deal with Iran. Here's the president on Friday.
Since I took office, the typical 401k is up more than $30,000. And I've created 300,000 jobs in the last 2 months, smashing all expectations. Remember this, right now, more people are working in the United States than at any time ever before, by far. Look, energy is a big ball game. That's the big one. And we're going to get that down. It'll get down to where it was, maybe even get down lower. But we had it down to a number that was so good they hadn't seen it since my first term.
Joining me now is the director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
The stock market is soaring. There is no doubt about that. There is optimism about AI, corporate earnings. Everything seems great, but you've got the pesky problem of high oil prices, which translates at the pump for consumers. And Kevin, we're starting to see those inflation concerns creep into the bond market, giving us a little bit of a picture there that things might be difficult as we proceed forward. The president is saying that a deal appears to be near finalization. How quickly can consumers expect to feel some relief?
Right. Well, you know, I think that the president and Marco Rubio have spoken very clearly about how close we are to a deal, and I don't want to get in front of that train. But I can say that as soon as a deal is reached, then the straits are open and oil starts flowing again. And there's an enormous amount of stuff that's sort of pent up and locked into the straits, but an enormous amount also of new reserves that can be put online, especially in Saudi Arabia and UAE. And so as people are getting ready to get their oil refineries going back to full capacity and everything, then there's just basically a gusher of oil that could come out. As we've done a lot of careful modeling about how long it's going to take for things to get back to normal, and I can tell you that we've already seen signs that people are a little bit wary about buying oil on the spot market right now because they expect the price to drop a lot sometime soon. And so that's a very, very good sign. And if you're talking about inflation, there are a lot of other great signs in inflation. You saw that President Trump set up his Trump RX, expanded his Trump RX effort to get drug prices down. And we just had a big event in the Oval to help get grocery prices down. And so I think that if you look at the last few data reports, then the energy prices were absolutely concerning, but the core was barely moving at all. oil. And I think that as soon as we get energy prices going back down, you could actually be looking at negative inflation because of the energy price going down.
I think you're right. And I've been covering oil and gas for years, so I've seen these moves higher and also these moves lower. And I'm thinking to myself also, you know, $5 was the mark under Joe Biden with his 9% inflation. We're not there yet, but we are heading into the peak of the summer driving season. So would you caution consumers that the summer could be a little bit bumpy as the details of this deal are finalized? They might feel a little more pain at the pump, but maybe come fall, they'll see some relief?
Well, we'll see how it goes, but you know, I think that don't forget that the people who are buying energy are then selling it over months, and they know that prices are going down. And at the beginning, the naysayers said that the oil price would be way above 150 if we shut the straits, and here we are, you know, a little bit below 100. And so I think that oil has surprised significantly on the downside. I expect gasoline prices will as well as soon as the straits are open. And don't forget that U.S. production has never been higher, and so the U.S. economy is actually not the economy that's most impacted by all this. It's the Asian economy.
Absolutely. And that set the stage for President Trump even being able to take this on because the production here at home was robust. So I imagine that he knew oil prices would handle this within a better range as they have. Let's talk about Kevin Warsh, Kevin Hassett, because he was sworn in as Fed chair. And obviously, President Trump sparred with Jerome Powell. There were calls on social media to lower rates, but the economy was in a different position then. So you could make the case for it. Right now, you've actually got Fed governors who are saying maybe a rate hike would be warranted in this situation. I imagine Kevin Warsh will probably just stay the course, keep rates where they are. But when do you think that it would be possible to realistically talk about a rate cut again?
Well, I think that first of all, you know, I have a great friendship with Kevin. We've been friends for something like 3 decades. We're almost in offices next to each other at Stanford University before I came back here and he went over there. And when the president asked me, did I think he'd be a great Fed chair, I said absolutely he would. And I think one of the reasons is he's got the experience. He came in '08 during the financial crisis as the youngest Fed governor ever. And so he's basically a seasoned hand who's coming in to handle a tricky situation. But the bottom line is this, that there are an enormous number of factors that are putting downward pressure on prices, like the deregulatory effort for grocery prices we talked about last week, like the big supply shock from AI, which increases supply and puts downward pressure on demand, the massive capital spending boom that we're seeing right now. So there are a lot of things that are pushing downward pressure on prices, or putting downward pressure on prices. Energy is putting an upward pressure on price. I think a lot of people are thinking, geez, it should be the energy is the only story, but it's really not the only story. It's not even the biggest story, which is why core inflation has stayed about where it is. Again, we expect energy prices, as soon as there's a deal, to plummet. And when that happens, then there'll be a lot of room for the Fed to do the right thing at lower rates. But again, I respect the independence of the Fed and the intellect of Kevin Warsh, and I'm sure that he'll work it out on a data-dependent way. President Trump emphasized over and over, I was there with him when Kevin was sworn in, that he expects the Fed to be independent, and he expects Kevin to look at the data, do the right thing, and I expect that as well.
All right, and let's finish with this. When gas was $5 a gallon and the 9% inflation under Joe Biden was being called transitory, Democrats weren't saying anything. Actually, they were telling people that they weren't, were wrong about what they were feeling and what they were experiencing, that inflation wasn't real. However, right now they're pushing this narrative that under the big, beautiful bill, if you got a refund, what you paid in extra gas now has eaten into that. And people are digging into their savings and really, really struggling right now. Actually, the American consumer has been pretty resilient throughout this. Would you agree?
Right, and in fact, you had mentioned consumer sentiment early on. You know, one of the interesting things is that the Michigan survey, which estimates consumer sentiment, has like a whole bunch of Democrats in the survey, but they actually give you the party identification. And so while Joe Biden was giving us this terrible stagflation with runaway inflation, then the Democrats in the consumer sentiment survey were saying that things were fantastic. The numbers were way above 100. Right now, basically go to December when we had a great year with very reduced inflation. They said that the economy was totally in the pits.
Right.
The Democrats, it was only, and their consumer sentiment index was only 32. And so right now the consumer sentiment index for the Michigan survey is just a worthless piece of data. But if you go to the Conference Board, they have something called consumer confidence. And consumer confidence reflects the fact that people think they have a job, people see their incomes growing, and the consumer confidence survey is actually still a good economic indicator. And that's why you're seeing retail sales go up. GDP right now for the second quarter is looking like it's going to be north of 4%. And that's because people are confident in the Trump economy. And I think that people, but if you look at the left-wing media, the only thing they talk about is the Michigan survey, and they haven't really dug into the facts to see that it's actually being driven by Democrats who have Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah. And they don't look at the big, beautiful bill and all the other economic policies setting up that engine of growth.
Correct.
National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett, thank you so much for being here.
Great to see you. Here.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.